Hi, thanks for joining Life with Lisa Bradshaw. I'm Lisa Bradshaw. I'm here today with a return guest from last year, Shelly Milne of Cashmere Middle School. She invited me last year to participate in their Write Night, and I couldn't attend because I had a prior engagement. They invited me as an author here in our community, so I invited two of their students of Write Night last year to come to the show and interview me as they would have for that evening event. And we had such a good time, I asked Shelly if two new students could come this year and interview me on the show. This time I can participate. Write Night is on Thursday, October 18th. We'll be talking about that and more here with Shelly Milne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. It's been a good partnership for us, and our kids have learned a lot from the program, the anti-bullying program, and from your input as an author. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Don't Wait Project, which is the nonprofit I founded, we do an anti-bullying program with a filmmaker out of New York named Mike Fierstein. He's on his way here in a couple of weeks. So we've been partnering on that for about 6 or 7 years now in Cashmere School District, in all 3 schools there. And you were one of the first teachers who participated. So we go way back.
We've written scripts together.
Yeah, right? I know, short ones. Well, let's talk about Write Night. So how long has this program been happening? Last year wasn't the first year.
We've had different variations. So this will be the second Write Night where we're bringing in authors and we're interviewing the authors. The kids will tell you more about that. We wanted to make a time to celebrate the kids' writing, so that all of our students in 5th through 8th will be finishing a narrative writing unit. So we wanted to give them a chance to see how people can write for their life and for their careers, and also to celebrate their own writing.
One of the things I love about Cashmere Middle School is you do focus a lot on writing. I remember you invited me to come speak at the school, and I thought I was speaking in front of a class of, 30 students, and I was speaking to the entire school in the gym, which was fine with me. It didn't matter either way. I didn't know until I got there. That was a miscommunication on my part, but the whole school had participating in this writing exercise.
We like to spring things on people at the last minute, like, oh, by the way, Lisa, the whole school will be here. But our kids, if you remember at the end, the questions they had, we had to finally say, okay, and their questions weren't kid questions, they were writer questions, and they were really able to ask questions about the writing process. And so we really value that, and we like to bring in writers frequently to the middle school.
Well, and what I liked about that event, that's the thing, is when you're talking with or to presenting to middle schoolers, and you don't always get questions. And so we had an ongoing dialogue. You're right, it was going on for about 10 minutes, maybe a little longer. And I remember the advice I gave to them was about learning how to use a comma. As an editor, I mean, even adult writers, even public relations people who write press releases for a living need to learn that skill a little better. So what are some of the questions you feel that this program overall has answered for students?
Well, first of all, when you come up for Write Night, you might add in the apostrophe, because that's also really important. Okay,
it's very true.
So we could use some help there. I'm thinking that kids are going to have some of the same questions, because we have new kids now, some of the same questions about how do you take those stories from your life and make them memorable for readers, and how do you get that, focus in on that just right moment. And I think kids will probably have some of those same questions. How do you weave in the dialogue? They have questions sometimes like, what if you can't remember exactly what was said? And I said sometimes you have to improvise that and come up with kind of the big idea of the conversation that was memorable.
Right, because you don't remember exactly. When I wrote Big Shoes, the book that I was invited to speak about at Write Night, I had to be really careful. I felt like I was always checking myself, and I was for sure always checking with my late husband's mom, because my version, I wanted it to be everyone's truth. My truth is different than someone else's, right? I was at a different angle looking at this and living in it. But when you are writing about true things, it's important to tell the best truth you can. And I think as long as you're always operating with that in mind, you'll do the right thing. What are some of the things overall that Write Night and other programs that Cashmere Middle School does for writing and for its students, writers? What are some of the questions you think that the program has answered for the students? What do you think they're coming away with? What are they learning?
I think they're learning a big lesson that writing is for you can write for yourself, and you can write to improve the quality of your life and tell about, and you learn a lot about yourself.
You can process a lot through writing.
And I think they're learning those lessons. They're learning that writing goes far beyond the writing you do for a test. And you can just see the quality of their stories. And everyone has their own story to tell, and I think they're learning that lesson, that everyone has something interesting to write about. And they're also learning the lesson. Sometimes kids think that there are people who write, like, you know, authors like Lisa Bradshaw, and then there's everyone else. And they're learning that writing is just like anything else, and you can practice and you get better at it and better at it if you put the time into it.
I think one of the things I can attribute to some of the successes I've had, for example, to the Don't Wait Project tour and having to pitch that to businesses, hey, this is what I'm going to do, will you support me in it, is even writing a well-constructed email. You know, the communication that we have most often these days is through email in business. And to be able to write an articulate, clear, succinct email about what it is I'm asking, the ask, you know, and that's one of the things that I've worked on even with my son when he was applying to colleges. It's, you know, get to the point, but also let them get to the heart of what you're trying to do too. And so I hope that, you know, some of the things that the authors can teach the students at Write Night and any other programs that you guys offer there can kind of make that come through, because I do think that sometimes they think if you're not Stephen King,
right,
then you're not a writer.
And they're learning that lesson. We are actually one-to-one devices now, so every student has a Chromebook and a computer. And one of the things that my 5th grade technology class that they're working on this week, what to include in emails and how to make sure they're clear, and the difference between a formal and an informal email, because they're doing so much writing with their friends online and chatting. That's not the same as an email that they're asking someone for. So they're learning those lessons along the way.
And sometimes you start, you know, it starts very formal. I've seen that just in recent emails with a partnership for the next tour. It starts very formal, and then as you kind of are tackling things, it gets less formal because you're saving time, and it's just like you just sign your name. It's not sincerely or thank you, or, you know, certainly you want to be thankful and gracious, but it does become less formal. But certainly initial contact and all of that is important.
Well, just like developing a relationship.
In like face to face, right? It gets more casual as you get to know each other better. So Write Night is happening on Thursday, October 18th. You said 6:30 to 8 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And it's at Cashmere Middle School.
Right.
So people throughout the community can come. What will they see? What can they expect?
Well, they're going to see a panel of authors and an interview. We have some local authors coming in, and we have Erica Sage, which we'll talk about in a bit with the kids. And we also have some student areas where they can go and hear students talk about their narratives and even read pieces of those. We're looking at some ways to showcase student writing, and not just their finished product. One thing we're really trying to emphasize is the process that authors go through, so showing where the piece started and where it ended. And I think they have both Eli and Kaitlyn have some questions for you about that, like how many drafts do you go through, and we want to show the writing process, not just the final product.
Yeah, that's good, because sometimes you think what you've written isn't good enough and you toss it, and then if you revisit it a couple days later, you might have felt differently about it. So it's good to hold on to that stuff, but that's one of the things that I wanted to share with them as well. So I'll hold that entire thought for later. Well, thank you for being here. We're going to turn the rest of the show over to the students when we come back from the break. And again, the community is invited to Cashmere Middle School on Thursday, October 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You'll meet a couple of authors. I'll be there, as well as how many other authors?
We still have some numbers out. We're trying to find some local people coming in. Yes,
a few. So a few authors, and then the students will be in charge of that evening as well, asking the questions and leading the discussion. So I love that you put the kids in charge. It's really good. We'll be back in just a moment with 2 students from Cashmere Middle School.
So Pam, how's your mom doing?
She's okay. She's struggling. She'd like to stay in her house, and it's getting harder for her to do the daily chores.
What kinds of problems is she having?
Just basic house cleaning, you know, taking care of her house, yard work, taking care of her medicine.
It does sound exhausting.
It is very exhausting, and I always worry about her.
Aging in Adult Care can assist you or your loved one to remain comfortably and safely in their own home. Contact them today to start the conversation.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bradshaw, back on Life with Lisa Bradshaw show. Thanks for joining us. As I said at the beginning of the show, I have two guests in the studio today from Cashmere Middle School, and they are participating in Write Night at Cashmere Middle School on Thursday, October 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You are invited as a community member to attend. They've invited authors, including myself, to be part of the evening, and the students will have questions and interview the authors that evening. And I invited the students here today to kind of take over the show. I did this last year and it worked really well. So please welcome Eli and Kaitlyn to the show. You guys are in charge today. So Miss Milne gave you instructions to come on and have some questions prepared, and you have done that. So
Yeah.
Tell us a little about yourselves first. What grade are you in, and what is your interest in writing?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Eli, and I'm in 8th grade, and I like to write really descriptive writing. I like to kind of impress people and show them how well I can use descriptive details in my writing.
About events or about
Just
something
about
you see?
events,
Anything?
experiences.
So what about you, Kaitlyn?
So my name's Kaitlyn, and I'm in 8th grade, and I like writing fictional stories just because I like to, realistic fiction, because I like making stories up that could actually happen.
Yeah, maybe I could get some tips from you, because I'm writing fiction now for the first time, and I don't think I'm that good at it yet, but I'm practicing. That's what writing is practicing.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Whoever wants to ask questions first. So the students have prepared these questions ahead of time, and we're just going to have a dialogue, and from here on out, you guys, you two, are the hosts of the show.
Okay, so one of the questions we had is, what inspires you to write?
Real life events, usually. I have written 2 nonfiction books that were largely based on entirely based on 2 pretty huge experiences in my life and what I learned from them and the hardships. And if you write it well enough, it comes across as anyone's story. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a memoir or nonfiction. It's just storytelling. And I'm writing fiction right now, which is a little different. So it's still based on real life events, but it's a little harder when you can't remember every single thing that you intended to write about in the first place. You kind of have to make it up as you go.
Yeah.
So.
What was your dream always to be a writer, or
Always.
like did you have other dreams?
That's it,
Yeah.
always. I got a plastic typewriter for Christmas when I was about 6 years old, and that was what I'd begged Santa for. And it was red, and the greatest part about it is it had the correction ribbon. So when I'd make a mistake, I could go back and fix it. At that age, I could fix it. You know, now we just hit delete right on the
Yeah.
cursor. But that's all I ever wanted to be. I wanted to be an author, and later I wanted to write screenplays. But what I figured out as I moved through life and my career and had to earn a living, I figured out that there's all types of writing, and very few authors make a living just writing books.
Yeah.
So I had to diversify.
Did you always like want to write like stuff that's actually happened in your life, or did you have different ideas?
You know, I don't think I had any plans for that, what type of writing I would do. I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger. I wrote fiction. Part of what I was writing about even then was things that were happening to me as a kid, but kind of making it like a little more exciting than, you know, what was happening in a 10-year-old's life. So there was some fiction in there. But when I was 24, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I couldn't find books written by anyone even close to my age. And so as a newly married person who was facing, you know, maybe not being able to have a child and going through treatment, I thought, well, there's a book here. When I was done going through treatment, I'd kept a journal, and I turned that journal into a book. And then later in life, when I lost my husband, I wrote about his year-long illness in the 7 years after, and raising my son as a young widow. And so I had never intended to write about those things. In fact, the nurses who were taking care of my husband asked, "Are you going to write about this?" And I said, "No way. I'm just going to go to the corner of my world with my little family, and I don't ever want to write about this." And then 7 years after he died, I decided that I would. And So yeah, I think that I didn't really have a plan. I have a little bit of a plan right now of what I am writing next, and it's evolving, but it just happened to be that I thought these were things that could help other people. So that's what I wrote about.
Yeah, so you definitely enjoy to write about real life experiences and.
Yeah, it's pretty therapeutic. I think when I wrote my first book, you know, it was different in that I knew I survived it, and I had a baby, and everything turned out okay. And when I wrote about my late husband, it was very difficult to write about him in the past tense. But in the end, I was glad I did it. I wrote it for our son. In that case, I could have just given it to him, and he could have put it in a drawer and read it sometime. But I decided to publish it because, again, I thought it would help other people.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So, like, how long does it usually take you to write a book like that?
Well, the first book came a lot from the journals, so I was able to take the journal entries and then look at my calendar and make things match up and fill in the blanks and add dialogue, because that's important. Everybody wants to read dialogue in a book most of the time. It just breaks things up and makes things more interesting. And with Big Shoes, I set the launch date in September of 2011, and I did that in January. So every deadline I set for myself, I had to be met within, you know, a 7 to 10 day period for me to meet that goal. So I wrote Big Shoes in about 4 months.
Wow.
Sat down and wrote nearly every day.
Wow. To add on to that, how many like rough drafts does it take you to get to like your final draft on a book?
Well, if you take it a chapter at a time, you know, I don't make an outline or anything. Some people might think that's disorganized, but I might have written chapter 7 before I wrote chapter 2. It just depends. And that's what I'm finding with fiction. You can't do that as much because you got to build the story. But there's some things I already know about the story that I want to write about, so I'll do that, because if I'm inspired, then that's when I should be writing about that. So I can't answer that, because sometimes I nail it and sometimes I don't, but I always keep what I write, no matter what I think it is at the time. I might be writing one evening and I think, this isn't working, and I've written 2 pages, and then I put it away, and then 2 days later I revisit and I thought, oh, this is good stuff, and I build on that. So don't ever throw anything out.
Is there like a certain person who inspired you to be a writer?
Judy Blume. Probably. Judy Blume, I read all her books and Beverly Cleary books when I was young. I read the Little House on the Prairie books that were just so thick. I feel so accomplished when I'd finish reading one. I loved movies like E.T. and Rocky. I would say Sylvester Stallone as a kid. That's largely why I became a writer, because I watched Rocky. Have you ever watched the first Rocky?
I haven't, but I've heard
you
good
must.
stuff
You know,
about
Creed
it.
is coming out, I don't know how far into the sequence we are now, but Rocky is the most, probably, notably, one of the best written scripts of all time. And Sylvester Stallone was the underdog who had never written a script before, and they didn't want him to act in his own movie. And just read about it. And I was about 7 years old probably, and it changed the course of my. It was the first movie I sat in the theater and I just didn't want to move, because I just wanted to sit in it for a while. And the next movie like that for me was Good Will Hunting, and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote that. So it really started with movies, I think, because then they started turning books into movies, and that's a good time for me.
And then what was the first book you ever published?
So the first book was based on that cancer experience. And actually what's funny about that is I just received an email from my former agent saying it's going out of print and I got to buy what's left if I want it, and I get all the rights back to it. So because I wrote it when I was 27, I think I'll rewrite it, because I'm sure it could use some improvement, and perhaps republish it. We'll see. Yeah. So, let's take a quick break. You guys have great questions. Let's take a quick break and come back and finish up the questions you have. I'm talking with Eli and Kaitlyn of Cashmere Middle School. They're interviewing me, and I'll be participating with them at Write Night at Cashmere Middle School on Thursday, October 18th. We'll be back in just a moment.
Dear Merry Maids, please clean the kitchen, and the cabinets, and the floors, and the chairs. And I wish you could clean the dog. Colin is now feeding himself. Thanks, Megan.
Hi, Megan. No worries. We got it all cleaned up. Let's hope Colin gets past the spaghetti flinging stage soon. Till then, we've got you covered. See you next time. Merry Maids.
Hi, we're back. I am here with Eli and Kaitlyn. They are from Cashmere Middle School. I'll be participating with other authors at Write Night on October 18th. They are running the show. They have questions that they've been asking throughout our interviews, so you have a couple of questions left, I think.
Yeah, so if you hadn't become a writer, do you know like what you would have done? Like, is there something else that interested you that you would have done?
I think that because I don't just write in my career now, I produce videos for my nonprofit that I founded, the Don't Wait Project. I think just working in service, which is what I do now, serving the community in ways that maybe aren't typical, like you know, I believe in community support with food banks and clothing drives and all the tangible ways that we can support our community. But I feel like my work is, I'm a storyteller. And so sometimes that's writing, sometimes that's filming, sometimes it's through this show. So I think that's really all I ever wanted to do. I don't know what I would have done instead.
Yeah. And then do you like to write your books and drafts on pen and paper
No way.
or a computer?
No way, I can't. I don't. I do it all on the computer. And in fact, I rarely print it out until it's, maybe I got to send it somewhere for someone to edit it.
Yeah.
I think it's good to print it out maybe as you're editing yourself because you see things you wouldn't see that's on the screen. I do that. I edit 3 magazines, so I'll usually print that out so I can see it. But I don't have, my brain works faster than my penmanship, so.
Yeah.
Like, how many editors does your drafts go through?
For the book, if you hire a good editor, it should be one, and or if you're assigned a good editor. And what I did, like for example, with my second book, we had a hired editor, and then my high school English teacher took the final look at it because I'm still in touch with her. So she read through and made notes and things. So it's definitely whoever is editing it in that publishing house or whoever you've hired to do it. There's usually 2 set of eyes and then maybe one last person to take a look. And then sometimes there's still things missed. So that's why they have proofs, because once you print it out, it looks different.
And then were you always good at writing in school?
I was always working on it. So I won a couple of writing awards in elementary school. I always went to the writing workshops. I remember my English teacher in high school wrote in my journal that we had to share with our teacher that reading my journal was like reading a novel, and that is what changed me. And then I went to college and I had a few professors tell me I was a good writer, and then when I got an agent, that kind of made me feel like maybe I could do this for part of my living.
Yeah.
So I practice a lot. So anything we practice a lot at, we can hopefully do a good job of.
Yeah.
Do you spend a lot of time like writing? Like, how much time do you just
You know, I haven't been writing a lot lately, but when I have something I'm focused on, that's why I set that 4-month goal for writing Big Shoes, because I had to have it done for this whole project I was launching, the Don't Wait Project. So now, if I was sitting down to start writing, I would write at least 3 nights a week probably, and I write better at night than during the day.
Yeah.
So. We're running out of time. Oh my goodness, we only have just like 20 seconds. So Write Night is Thursday at Cashmere Middle School, Thursday, October 18th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. You will be participating. There'll be authors, including Erica Sage with Jacked Up, her book, and my book, Big Shoes, and a couple of other authors. And I thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You had great
having
questions.
us.
You guys thought you only had 1 question left, and we filled up a whole other segment.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
For all the latest news in North Central Washington, go to NCWLIFE.com or find us on Facebook. Got a news tip? Email us at news@NCWLIFE.com or call 888-2020.